You are now tuned into Flipping the Birds, a Philly Sports Network podcast.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds.
He's into the end zone. Touchdown, Eagles.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to a fresh and a very well overdue episode of Flipping the Birds. You knew it was Flipping the Birds when we were actually 15 minutes late for the show, because only we can do that on PSN, but that was completely my fault. Anyways, Zach, how are you, my brother? How's everything going on your end? It's been, we talk on a regular, but it's been a minute that we've been on here communicating, talking birds.
Yeah, it's a new season of FTB. It's a new reason why we're late. It's not me this time. That's a first, so that's pretty cool. But Sixers season ended. That was a thing that happened. Definitely didn't go like the Eagles season. So now I'm definitely ready to talk some football. Get back into some draft conversations right before the draft, really right before the draft. And looking forward to talking to all these great FTB people. So excited. Got a lot of people already back in the chat. Got Zach, got Wesley, Martian Lynch. What's up, guys? Great to have all of you. Looking forward to just a kick-ass season of FTB.
Yes, and there will be changes once the season starts kind of rolling around a bit. We are going to be having obviously our two shows a week, but it'll be on Tuesday nights and Friday nights as opposed to Saturday mornings, just because life is life and it's easier that way. So you'll be seeing rotating faces here and there, but nonetheless, it'll be a constant of Zach, myself, Morgan. Shout out to Morgan, who's doing his thing up there, up north. And yeah, a big shout out because, hey, it's draft week. The offseason was, it wasn't the most sexiest, right? But they did their thing. They got the needed depth pieces to put themselves in a position where, honestly, there's not many weaknesses on this roster to begin with. Howie did this last year. He did this the year before where he signed depth pieces to put them in, position to hit on the draft as opposed to going for a need. They're going, best available player. And I'll be honest, I'm actually looking forward to a big weekend. Even though Howie said to temper expectations, I'm looking for a big weekend out of them because it just feels like the Eagles have to have something cooking up. They have 20 draft picks between this year and next year. They can't fit that many players in the roster to begin with, so they got to be making moves. They have a ton of fifth rounders. They have the first, second, third, and I believe a fourth rounder as well this year. What are your thoughts going into this weekend? Is it Howie's season, or is it back when they traded out of the first round? Ravens got Lamar Jackson, and we were all just went home a little bit sad.
Well, let's get one thing downright first and foremost. It's always Howie's season, right? This man bleeds for this city, right? So let's get that out of the way real quick. But you talked about the offseason not really being sexy to start. And you're right. I don't think that's incorrect to say. This is where it's time to watch Howie Roseman and time to watch him get to work effectively. You watch the Eagles, they go into the free agency period. They're not overly active. All right, well, why is that? They're losing a lot of talent, and it's hard to kind of replace that talent one for one, especially coming off of a Super Bowl, because all of your leaving free agents, your pending free agents, they have that Super Bowl tax on them that players who are coming off of winning a chip have, right?
The Super Bowl tariff. Let's call it the tariff.
Yeah, okay. Let's not say we did. So, you're having that extra price to pay on top of it, right? This cost that does good by it being there. Anyway, so it's a lot harder to bring back your own guys first and foremost. They brought back who they felt was most important, right? Zach Bond, I think he really was the most crucial free agency re-signing. And
you paid a linebacker money.
You paid a linebacker money, but the thing with it is that you look at a guy like Milton Williams, who I love Milton Williams, who's one of my favorite players on this defense last year, right? There's a little bit of that, and this is kind of that Bryce Huff effect that we saw the previous year. where you're not talking about a Super Bowl situation, but you're talking about a situation where you got a young guy coming off a great year and the expectations that he takes that step forward. Does Milton Williams have that step forward? I'm not saying he doesn't. I'm saying that's a question the Eagles don't have to answer next year that could end up being pretty costly for the Carolina Panthers, right? You look at a guy like Josh Sweat. Love Josh Sweat. He was such an integral part of this defense. No one is discounting what he did as a member of the Philadelphia Eagles. Still an Eagle to this day, if you ask him. Josh Sweat, there's always going to be that concern in the back of someone's mind about his knees, right? How long will he last? He's already well overdue. And did he overcome those injury concerns? I certainly hope so. But he's healthy until he's not, right? So that's another concern there. On top of it, this free agency class just wasn't that good. That talented. Now, you had so many Eagles at the top of it, and people said, oh, well, they won the Super Bowl. A lot of key contributors. That's why they're at the top of the free agency rankings. Part of it, too, is that there weren't a lot of stars on the market, right? So you're in a situation where there's not really a whole lot of need for Howie to kind of go out and get these guys because you're going to be able to get younger, potentially better, potentially cheaper, potentially better fitting pieces through the draft. Not to mention, and this kind of gets where we're all kind of connecting everything that we're discussing, Brian, the ability to trade for veterans later on down in the offseason, once we start getting to the draft, past the draft, through training camp, everything such as that. So this is now, I think, the moment where you really want to start paying attention to what Howie's doing because he's about to start getting to work.
I completely agree. And let's talk about how he's done so far, right? You brought up Zach Bond. He paid Zach Bond. He paid the linebacker. The guy, I feel like there's not enough great words in the dictionary to say about Zach Bond just because he was that tremendous and that detrimental to this team and this defense last year. Excuse me. He also paid Cam Jurgens, who a lot of people were fearful because of the back injury, right? He extended him to 2029. He also paid Saquon Barkley, gave him an extension on top of, already a fresh deal that he had, rewarding him for the, phenomenal season he had. So, and I believe Lane Johnson was also extended this offseason. A lot of great moves, right? A lot of great things to pave the way for the future. How he mentioned he has, I think, several guys that are paying $15 million, that are getting paid $15 million annually. And you can only do so much with that. Those guys on the offense, heavily on the offense. There's not a lot of guys on defense getting paid a lot of money. Like Darius Slay is gone, right? I think Zach Bond has to have the biggest contract on the defense as of right now. Jalen Carter is going to get paid. We're all.
Was his bigger than Bryce Huff's? Was his deal bigger than Huff's?
Man, he's still on the roster. I completely forgot about him. Yeah, Bryce, mother effer. Bryce Huff is, yes. So you have two big deals on the defense, right? I mean, if Bryce Huff does stay past draft weekend, then gotta live with it at the end of the day. But it seems like Howie's creating a sense where it's like, as long as I keep my offense intact and I continue to keep a rotating door of efficient talent on defense with young guys coming in, young guys getting paid, young guys money. I'm honestly waiting for him to adopt the Atlanta Braves concept and idea of like paying young guys a little early and extending them long term for big money. But with Howie doing the things that he's done, everybody's extended that needs to be extended except for Jalen Carter, except for Nolan Smith and Jordan Davis. This weekend, I feel like, is one of the most important weekends that Howie's ever had when it comes to the draft. After the 2017-2018 Super Bowl, like, they bit the dust afterwards. They drafted guys that were, semi-good, but weren't impactful players right there and then. They signed veteran players that weren't much. This time, they did everything opposite. They signed young guys that are proven talent that needs to prove a little bit more. You have on the defensive end, Azeez Ojulari. You have Josh. Is it Uche?
I always thought it was Uche.
O'Shea. Okay, there we go. Josh Uche. My concern, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I might be drawing a blank. They didn't do anything else for safety outside of getting rid of CJ.
No, untouched so far.
And cornerbacks, they added Adoree. But outside of that, yeah, exactly.
We'll see how long that lasts. I'm not overly confident in that move necessarily.
Is Adoree Jackson the new Devin White? I feel like we got to crown somebody the new Devin White this year.
I don't want to crown anybody the new Devin White because that just feels very rude to do so. but potentially yes, he's got the best odds of anyone on the team so far.
Okay, we'll go with that. So there's not a whole lot of needs, right? But there are needs there. Like, can Sidney Brown step up and be that guy that CJ was? We know Sidney's been injured. We also know Sidney's a missile out there, so he plays really hard and really fast, and he's prone to getting injured. Cornerback, do they trust Keely Ringo that much to be that guy? Do they trust Adoree Jackson, who just got here, to be that guy across from Quinyon? There's some solid options in the first round that could be those guys, like a Malachi Starks, a Trey Amos. Even defensively, you have Walter Nolan. Like, there's guys that could come in and you could be like, oh, okay, like they hit on this draft. But I don't think any of those guys are lasting to 32.
Yeah, you hear, and this is where I feel like you're looking at the great rise and falls of the draft, leading right up until the draft itself, right? And one thing that's kind of consistently been heard about Malachi Starks is that he's kind of falling into the 20s, so is that mid 20s, is that late 20s? I think he's probably going to go somewhere between 23 and 27 would be my guess. So I don't think he's going to be there at 32. Walter Nolan's a guy where if he's there at 32, you might as well just already give him the Eagles hat and jersey, like, right away. There's not a question. If he's there at 32, in my mind, that he's not going to be a Philadelphia Eagle. It's just, is he going to be there at 32? This is, again, where we can start talking about potential trades, is that with the amount of draft picks that Philadelphia has, is a move up out of the question. Now, initially, I was thinking more so the tendency that they would trade back, just thinking of, trying to maximize that value, as opposed to a Walter Nolan. There's guys a little bit later back in this draft, like a Darius Alexander, who also kind of fit potential, need that the Eagles have, the way that they like to run their defensive line, right? The defensive line out of Toledo. What we're looking at now is we're looking at a team that has all of these draft picks, has the ability to be aggressive, where not a lot of other teams, frankly, do. You have teams who are kind of scrambling, trying to figure out the quarterback market, right? And I think that's one reason why we're potentially seeing a potential slide for a guy like Malachi Starks. It's not, it's not anything against his ability, right? But it's more so, we're looking at the rise of the typical positions: edge rushers, wide receivers, running back, which is one of the deepest positions in this entire draft. Now they're on, showcase, and we're looking at potentially 3 running backs in the first round, which I think would be crazy, but that's a realistic possibility, right? So, with all of this, the tight end class is fairly good in this draft as well. With all of this happening and everything kind of just in flux and everybody all over the place, is going to be an evaluation period between now and Thursday where Howie is going to have to, and a lot of it's going to be reading how the board falls. Last year's draft, I don't think anyone expected the draft to fall the way that it did necessarily, because I think we were talking about trading up for Keon Mitchell as opposed to just kind of standing pat.
I mean, I feel like we weren't even talking about Keon Mitchell, like, because it was just like a foregone conclusion.
It felt out of reach.
There. Yeah,
exactly. It felt completely out of reach. And, is that going to be Malachi Starks this year? They don't pick first, safeties in the first round, but also they don't sign linebackers or running backs. So, who the hell really knows what's going to happen? But the one thing that I would say is, you definitely don't want to rule out any possibilities with Howie, because he has, and this is his favorite word, optionality, right? So coming into this draft, I think that's just the one thing to watch, is like, if you're not somebody who, tends to watch the draft, you'd rather like read about it afterwards because you feel like, well, I just want to learn about who we're actually going to have. Watch this draft. If you're going to watch one, NFL draft in recent history, watch this one, because this is one where you're going to see Howie Roseman, I think, the most active that we've seen him. And last year, with the Cooper DeJean trade, obviously was interesting and fantastic as well. But even on night one, which is typically not overly interesting for the Philadelphia Eagles, as they've have a history of either trading back, or they have a history of, the first round history has not been great, in the past decade, but they're getting better, right? So between their picks in the first round getting better, the optionality this year, I think this first round is actually going to be pretty exciting to watch for Eagles fans.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very telling, right? Because this is, like I said, it's a very, very important weekend in Howie's history, because Howie constructed probably one of the better Super Bowl teams of this. I mean, of the Super Bowl era. Like we saw a complete roster from top to bottom.
Dominated
Veteran
the Kansas City Chiefs. There's not a lot of teams that can say that, regular season or postseason.
as well. And I mean, they dominated the Packers so much that Packers want the tush push ban because apparently that was the difference maker in their games. But they were a very dominant group, and a lot of the guys got flack. AJ Brown got flack at times. Jalen Hurts got flack at times because they weren't doing enough, but they were doing exactly what they had to do, and you rarely see that in football. So you're gonna see Howie Roseman having to build another championship team. Because we know Jeffrey Lurie's not happy with one, he's not happy with two, and they know how they failed last time with what they did. So now it's kind of like, okay, I don't expect them to repeat, but I do expect them to compete in the NFC Championship game, the bare minimum, just because that's how good of a team they are at their core. And if you build the right pieces around them, they can be that good or even better. And the NFC still doesn't really what's it called? Doesn't really intimidate me still as of yet. But how we should, have the mindset like we gotta reach the NFC Championship game, and these are the moves that are gonna do it. A move that's been coming up has been a weird rumor, has been Kayvon Thibodeau. And in exchange for I think it was like I forgot what it was. It was Dallas Goedert and some picks. How do you feel about that kind of move? Like, going after a guy like Thibodeau who's very young but hasn't really done much and his team is giving up on him. Do you feel like, the Eagles should target those kind of guys that are quote unquote veterans?
Well, right away, Marshawn Lynch has already put me in a little bit of trouble. Do I lean into the joke in the first episode of the new season, or do we put the past behind us?
We put the past behind us, okay? He's been trying to bait us with the Sixers stuff, and I made sure I stayed away from that because I know how bad of a season it was, and now he's trying to do a Giants.
I'm dead inside, man. You can talk about Sixers all you want, that's fine, but we'll table the Giants fandom for now until you give me reason not to. But
apparently other podcasts have picked up on that for some reason. And actually think it's a legit thing. So let's temper that down because
we'll focus up for now. We'll handle the task at hand, which is Kayvon Thibodeau, right? I'm not against the idea of necessarily bringing him in, right? I think there's things that Vic Fangio can do with near anyone in this league and improve their play. Now, is he going to turn into who everyone always imagined he could be? I don't think so. Not necessarily in Philadelphia. Am I willing to give up a third and a fifth? Not necessarily that. That seems a little rich for my blood too. I might be able to give up a future fourth. I might be willing up to give up, a fifth this year and a future third day pick. I'm not looking to give up too much for Kayvon Thibodeau because I feel like there's guys that you can get in this draft even later on, and they don't necessarily have to be a contributor at the edge, but who can contribute in a meaningful way that even perhaps Kayvon Thibodeau may not be able to, because we haven't seen that drive out of him. We haven't seen that desire out of him, and he just hasn't been able to put things together on the field in the way that you would want to see. So I think that there's definitely something to be said about looking for those buy low candidates. A guy like Thibodeau, I'm willing to buy low. I'm not willing to buy high on a prove it guy.
So who's a guy that you will actually near and dear your heart be like, you know what? If the Eagles want to make this move, like this is the guy for them to get. Like this just makes too much sense for them to pass up.
Yeah, for me, a lot of it's really been more so focused on, well, let's address these needs through the draft, right? Because there's definitely, I think, a lot if you're looking to remain competitive for a chip. Definitely a lot to be said about making these moves for veterans, but I'm trying to build in the short, medium, and long term, right? So when you're looking at that case and you look around these rumors around the league, the other guy who's been mentioned, and it was only mentioned briefly, thank goodness, was TJ Watt, right? If there's an opportunity for TJ Watt, obviously I am inherently interested. Do I think that TJ Watt's going to come to Philadelphia? Not necessarily. And the problem if you bring in a guy of that big of a size, right, a TJ Watt level player, is that you're immediately going to have to pay them, right? And that's also part of the issue if you're talking about a guy like Kayvon Thibodeau, is because what do you value him at, right? With a TJ Watt, immediately here's the entire purse. With a Kayvon Thibodeau, it's like, all right, well, what's what you start dancing around, you start shifting, trying to see what change you have in your pocket. What's fair for a future deal. So as far as any specific names, I don't really know that there's anyone who I'm necessarily hell bent on the Eagles going out and acquiring in terms of existing veterans, on the trade market. But one thing that I can say is that any move that they make needs to be made with the interest of both the present and future in mind. And I don't think that you can cop and just go, focused one direction, right? This is not a team that is, win or bust this year. This is not a team that has no chance at winning this year, and you have to build purely for the future, right? So, I'm not looking to necessarily bring in a whole lot of offensive weapons. I think they're pretty much set there with how deep the running back draft class is. I feel like you can get a guy late in rounds. Jahan Dotson did fine. If you want to draft a guy on day 2, I'm okay with that as well. Tight end's going to be the big thing. It's really more interesting, who are the Eagles going to send out, right? Because the biggest rumor has been Dallas Goedert, and I talked to Dallas right before the Super Bowl. I kind of acknowledged the elephant in the room. What if this is his last season in Philadelphia? He leveraged to me how much he wanted to win that Super Bowl just in case that was the case, because Philly's home for him. He doesn't want to be anywhere else. Great for him that he was able to do that. So if it is time for Dallas Goedert to move on to another team through the trade market, right? Then that's when we start talking about, well, do we potentially bring in another veteran tight end in addition to the draft? Because your alternative in that case is Grant Calcaterra. How are you feeling about Grant Calcaterra in that case? Are you looking to bring in a veteran alongside a draft prospect, or are you cool with Grant and a prospect?
I think I'm part of the 1%ers. I actually like Grant Calcaterra a lot. I know that his issue was.
I'm not knocking him. It's just
that
enough for a Super Bowl contender?
Yeah, I completely I get that. But Grant, I feel like he's good enough to be part of a committee, right? Like if you draft a guy like Mason Taylor, a guy like Loveland, a guy like what's the kid's name? Is it Harold Fannin Jr.?
Is that the Bowling Green kid?
Yes, I think so. Right?
Yeah, that's him. Yeah.
If you draft one of those guys to pair with a Grant, I like it. I like the idea of it. I think it works. Because if there's anything we learned this year is that the tight end position outside of Goddard wasn't a focal point. But when Grant's number was called, he was making plays. Like the kid was moving out there. He was making catches. You didn't feel Goddard being missed that much. And that's what I liked about Grant. And he has that relationship with Jalen from back in the day, from college days, that they have that vibe already where they can roll with each other and not skip a beat. The only thing that sucks about Goddard is, like, I get that you have to move him, right? But then it's a dead cap of $11 million. Like, why not just let him play out the last year of his deal, and then you milk it for what it's worth? Like, he's gonna miss 5 or 6 games to begin with, so it's not like he's gonna be there. But regardless, in crunch time, playoff time, Goddard can come up big. We've seen him. I mean, he carried them to the victory against the Saints. We've seen Dallas Goedert do great things. He's a good blocker. He's a good receiver. He's good in the locker room. I would love it if he stayed, but I understand that him being as injury prone as he is and being paid what he is, that they got to move on off from him. But it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to do it now. Like, just let him go into free agency and let him do his thing.
Well, the other thing around that too is, when you look at players who are going to be moving on next season, right? You look at that list. Obviously, Dallas Goedert is the currently highest paid player who's going to be paid. There's not a lot of guys who are necessarily going to be signing elsewhere for big deals. Maybe if the Eagles decide not to bring back Jordan Davis and he gets a decently sized deal elsewhere. A lot of these other guys that you're talking about, Jahan Dotson's going to be a free agent. Guys who they sign on one of your deals this year, like Azeez Ojulari. There's not a lot. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is that you're not getting really to take advantage of the comp pick market, right? Which we know that Howie loves to do. So that, I think, is the rationale behind moving him now, is that you're just predicting, reading the tea leaves next year and saying, well, we're not really going to be able to get draft compensation because we're going to probably buy more than we sell next offseason. So with that being the case, do we try and move him now to get that draft compensation up? But like you said, with 20 picks in the next 2 drafts, is that a necessity? Or is this, well, let's go for at least maybe one last ride. And then who knows? Maybe we find some kind of middle ground hometown discount on Dallas Goedert to play, the next 2-3 years in Philadelphia. And let's just keep riding this thing while we can. Now, I'm not saying don't address tight end in the draft. I'm not saying, don't keep Calcaterra around, because I think, like you said, Brian, he did impress, particularly, as a route runner, as a receiver. But even still, I don't think it's necessarily you have to get rid of Dallas Goedert. It's just the mindset of, do we want to lose him for nothing? I don't think that if you're to play the season with Dallas Goedert, make it all the way through, make it however far in the playoffs you do, I don't consider that nothing, right? I don't consider giving Dallas Goedert one last ride with the Philadelphia Eagles nothing. So I'm perfectly okay keeping him around. It's just a matter of if Howie Roseman and the rest of the front office agrees.
And then, I mean, could you possibly package Goddard with some picks and get a guy like, this is not what I'm thinking. This is just an example, like a guy like TJ Watt. Like could you move Dallas Goedert for that veteran player on defense? Because it's got to be a defensive move. There's no way they're not trading for an offensive lineman or a running back or wide receiver. The offense is set, but defensively, like, do you trade Goddard and a certain amount of picks for a guy like a TJ Watt or anybody else that's out there that's available that we're unaware of?
Well, the thing with the Dallas Goedert is I don't really know where he has value, right? Like, that he has value in Philadelphia. I value him here. But when you're looking around the league, are you going to send him to Atlanta? No. Are you going to send him to Baltimore? No. They have 2 very good tight ends already. Are you going to send him to, I don't know, I guess you could argue Cincinnati, but their cap situation is already kind of screwed. I don't really think that they're looking to bring in any more. Yeah, and I'd have to double check his cap ramifications for the team acquiring Dallas Goedert. So maybe Cincinnati makes more of a fit than I'm initially giving them. But in terms of acquiring, let's say, a pass rusher in return, I don't really think there's any true value there. But the issue with Dallas too is that because he has these injury concerns, he's not like necessarily like, oh well, we just drafted this quarterback. A lot of teams like to get a tight end as a safety blanket for a young quarterback that they have on their roster. He's not necessarily that safety blanket, right? He's a tight end who can elevate your offense, but he's not necessarily that,
he's not as accurate
through, safety valve, right? So at that point, again, like, where does he necessarily go? You could look at a team potentially like the New York Giants. Do you want kind of a 2-headed monster of him and Theo Johnson? Potentially, because you have a guy like Russell Wilson who's slinging it. He's a little more ready for a guy who could potentially elevate the offense as opposed to needing to be that safety valve. Or, we could litigate all day long, where he could potentially fall. But there's just not a lot of, I think, eye-popping situations for Dallas Goedert in general, let alone where there's a player who they'd be interested in sending back to Philadelphia that the Eagles would admire as well. So I think if he is traded, you're more so looking for draft compensation, and then in a separate move, they potentially could, reutilize that draft compensation or other draft compensation to potentially bring in someone. And again, in general, I don't see one of these premier. And we saw what happened with Miles. Earlier this season with Myles Garrett, where a lot of it's just a power play for a contract. And these guys, for the most part, like, they may have their preference, but they want to get paid. They don't care where they get paid. Now, Myles Garrett, I think, was in Cleveland, and it worked out. He got paid in Cleveland. You look at a guy like, the other 2 big names, obviously, TJ Watt and Micah Parsons. The Cowboys aren't trading Micah Parsons to Philadelphia. And the only reason I think Micah Parsons hasn't signed yet is because he's waiting for TJ Watt to sign. Because Micah Parsons, at least his agent, and I'm sure Parsons as well, wants him to be the highest paid pass rusher on the market. And they know that it's basically a game of chicken right now, that as soon as one of these guys signs, it's going to be probably 30 minutes until the next guy signs for whatever, $5 million more, $3 million more, $1 more, doesn't really matter. But
It doesn't feel like
that's
Dallas
kind
can
of the race
afford
at the
to
moment.
keep Michael Parsons at this point. Like, they got to move him. Like their cap situations is just pure hell.
Well, Jerry, I saw some that I didn't really read too much into it because once I see Jerry involved, it tends just to give me headaches right away. But talking about 2 major trades, he does that radio show every week, or that's that spot. He talked about 2 major trades coming down the pipeline for the Cowboys. Now, obviously, it's draft week, so does that reference specifically like draft picks being moved, or are they moving players, or like what are they necessarily moving? I don't really know. But if you're Dallas, like, you got to read the writing on the wall. The offensive line is in shambles compared to where it was in the past. You have some intriguing younger pieces. You don't really have a lot of young stars necessarily on that defense. And Dak Prescott remains a major question mark. So, it's one of those things where, not that Jerry would ever do this, and not that I'd ever want to give the Cowboys advice that would help them, but they seem a lot closer to retooling or even rebuilding than they do contending, which has not been different than the past 30 years. So,
did you see what Dak Prescott's dead cap hit is if they were to get rid of him?
No, can we say that over the air, or do we have to censor it? It just sounds too egregious. We might get some people at home fainting if they hear that dollar amount.
$180 million.
Oh my gosh!
I'm making sure I see the commas in the right spot, but yeah, it's $180 million. CeeDee Lamb's dead cap hit $84 million.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's a tough situation to be in. I mean, really, now you found yourself in the situation where you have no option but to continue to bet on yourself and hope that you can, America's team your way into bringing in people because you're the Cowboys. Effectively do what the Lakers had done for a number of years. Even towards the end of Kobe's career, the beginning of LeBron's, time in LA when they weren't really necessarily as great, just trying to bring in these veterans who, or these even younger players in the league, hopefully, who are just like they've wanted to be a Cowboy. But the problem is that now you're leaving. It's been so long since the Cowboys have been good. That generational gap is growing larger and larger between, you're not getting these young kids in the league anymore who think about, when they were a kid and the Cowboys were so great. That wasn't the case for a lot of these people in the league now. So it's getting tougher and tougher to do that as they continue to lose. And Duck just effectively bringing up, my point, the Lakers still were and are winners. Okay, well, they lucked into the Luka Doncic trade. They were in a pretty bad situation before they got the Luka Doncic trade. But
I don't get how that trade even went down to begin with.
People in Dallas have no idea what they're doing. That's what happened. Like that is, I think if we look across sports, that is one thing that we can pretty confidently say at the moment, is that, between Nico Harrison and everything going on with the Dallas Cowboys, an absolute nightmare. So two of the worst run franchises in major sports right now, the Dallas Cowboys and the Dallas Mavericks. But to Doug's point, like, if you're not winning, you're not getting that attractive, like, oh, I want to be a Dallas Cowboy because that's what all the greats do. They're Dallas Cowboys. Like, there's not kids who looked up to Michael Irvin coming into the league anymore now. You're getting kids who looked up to, and I'm not saying people are going to join the Arizona Cardinals, but like the freaking Larry Fitzgeralds, even Randy Moss is kind of like coming by the wayside, like Terrell Owens, but he changed all these teams, and so you're not really seeing that kind of like brand loyalty in a sense to the star that there once was.
It's definitely a turning of the guard for Dallas out there. But speaking of turning of the guard, I mean, Thursday night comes down. Eagles are currently selecting 32. Let's just go with how we feel, right? Do you honestly think the Eagles will make a selection in the first round on Thursday night?
I do. I actually think they're going to trade out.
Oh, actually, I feel like they're going to trade out.
Ooh, interesting. How far back do you think that they're going to go?
I was playing around with the mock simulators, and obviously, these things are not actual legit, GMs, right? But it just feels like you can trade back into the second round and high up in the second round. Like, you could get probably like the 36 or the 40 range, right? And you could get a guy like Mason Taylor, who will probably escape the first round. I've seen in several mock drafts as well. Trey Amos, escaping the first round. That I'm very attracted to that kind of piece. Getting adding a cornerback, but it feels like surrounding the Eagles right now is the idea of like they need a young tight end. Like that has stolen almost every headline and every mock draft I've seen is Dallas Goedert's out, you need a young tight end. Dallas Goedert's out, you need a young tight end. Mason Taylor seems like to be the surefire pick, but it's just weird how the drafts have gone in recent years. Like we don't know what the hell is gonna happen. If there's gonna be a weird run on running backs, a weird run on wide receivers all of a sudden. Linebackers. I would love to see them get a guy from either Michael Williams or Jalen Walker out of Georgia. Like one of those two guys. If you get them, Howie's definitely needs his own statue, but it's gonna require, like you said, like probably a trade up.
Yeah, I'm looking at the second round candidates, who I've kind of glanced over, through this entire offseason, our offseason, of course, we're talking about. And, again, there's guys who I do have some interest in. I feel like James Pierce is a guy who could fall into that day 2 selection.
Pierce
And that's
had
I think
outside issues, right? I mean, off the field issues.
Is that the most? There's a couple of guys who have been having some outside issues as of late. So he was suspended and did hit his draft stock. The reason for it was, now this is what matters, I would say the most, is because the Eagles have been very clear about like where they do and don't draw the line, right? So we know that he has been suspended. It's a maturity thing. All right. So the one thing that I'm not seeing connected is when we talk about acts of not having the time of day for, right? Not being interested in involving those people in their process, right? So I'm not seeing mention of that with James Pierce. So I would say that the possibility for the Eagles to draft him would remain open until, should we hear anything about that? And because of the severity of that, it's not something I want to put on anybody's name, especially without any sort of proof whatsoever. We know that there's maturity issues. Jalen Carter, like people said the exact same thing, and he like honestly, people want to still complain about Jalen Carter's maturity. I see a leader on the defense.
I
when
love
look at Jalen Carter,
yeah.
right? Like I see a team that was able to funnel that immaturity right into like it's not Brian Dawkins type of leadership, right? But into that I'm trying to even think about a comparable player. It's somewhere between Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox, because Brandon Graham talked so much shit his entire career. Fletcher Cox is actually the guy holding Brandon Graham back, right? But there's that kind of production, that leadership by production that Fletcher Cox had that Jalen Carter shares as well. With a little bit of that chatterbox Brandon Graham mixed in also. So if James Pierce is a guy that they can kind of turn into that, that's somebody who might fall into that second round, who, like I said earlier, I'm interested in. Kevin Winston Jr. out of Penn State, somebody who it all depends on the medicals. Just an explosive, potentially elite safety, but his season obviously ended prematurely. He had a partially torn ACL when he was in Penn State. So there's some names who like you can move back, and I can be all about this. I talked about Darius Alexander already out of Toledo, and he's kind of fits that bill of that movable chess piece on the defensive interior line. But so there's options. Like I see the potential for it, but I just look at the talent, the immense talent of a guy like a Walter Nolan. Of again, I'm not sure how likely they are to go safety, but a Malachi Starks. There's guys like Kenneth Grant out of Michigan. Like, is he gettable effectively? And if they are, I'm hard pressed to see a world where Howie Roseman doesn't at least entertain that idea. And there's this list could go on and on, because then you got guys like Shamar Stewart, who I feel like there's so much talent in that first round that you just are going to want to see them pounce on at some point. But then to make one last argument to the contrary of it, this quarterback market is so volatile that you potentially see someone give the Eagles a nice juicy offer so they can just slide right on in and take whoever it is. Maybe they want to go for Jackson Dart towards the end of the round if he's not taken sooner. Maybe they want to go for Jalen Milroe at the end of the round, get that 5th-year option on a guy
It
like
feels
him.
like the Lamar Jackson draft all over again. Like just
it does. And what's funny? You know who they got in that Lamar Jackson draft?
Dallas Goedert.
Dallas got it. Exactly. That's who they got with the 2nd-round pick, man. Like
I thought it was a trick question for a second. Like, wait, is he trying to stop me?
Straight up. Like it's easy. There's no traps here, man. This is a brand new season. It's an easy layup. That was the Dallas Goedert draft. So it's definitely something to see as a possibility. And looking at, like, there's a whole lot of tight end talent, and I think the guys who you're really looking for, if you're talking about making that trade back, the 3 names you're probably looking at are Elijah Arroyo, Mason Taylor, and Terrence Ferguson. Mm-hmm. I kind of like Terrence Ferguson personally. I could see it, but again, I'm just not. It's I don't know if it's not as sexy to me, or I'm just not as rah tight end. I'm like, let's get back.
It just feels like a lot more smoke than anything with the tight end stuff in Philly, just because they don't really use, like, they use the guys to block. And even at that, like, they started bringing extra offensive linemen to take that spot. It doesn't seem Philly.
But the other thing too is that this is what you have to keep in mind. It's a deep draft for tight ends, mm-hmm. right? So are they necessarily going to go to the top and say, like,
you don't have to reach?
We have to get a top 5 tight end. Are they going to say that? Or are they going to say, hey, the 15th tight end in this draft class is going to be better than the 10th ranked tight end in next year's draft class? So why don't we wait till the 4th, 5th round and pick up this year's 15th ranked tight end? And we're in a better position than if we waited another year. Like, I mean, that's a possibility. And there's again, like, you talked about Harold Fanning, Gunnar Helm's a guy out of Texas. I actually like Benjamin Ustorek out of Georgia as that potential kind of thunder to the lightning of Grant Calcaterra. He's a lot more of that blocking focused tight end, kind of like think of it as a Jack Stoll, but I think he'd serve that role even better. So I mean, like, there's options for Philadelphia, and if you're in a situation like Philly where you have such premier offensive talent, I get the idea of the embarrassment of riches. I just don't think that you need an S-ranked player at every single starting position.
Yeah, it's got. This is the Eagles' fault, because they've gotten to the point where they're ruining our jobs because they have no freaking needs.
They're too damn good.
Like, there's no needs anywhere except for safety, because I feel like safety, like, they keep hammering the nail and it keeps on, like, the nail keeps on bending. It's not fitting. It's not the right fit, not the right move. Malachi Starks, the kid out of Penn State, the one you could get later on, Jalen Reed, guys like that. I feel like you know. They could fall in your lap. Vic Fangio could develop them however he needs to. You could get creative. I still love Sidney Brown. I love the idea of Sidney Brown. I love the tenacity of Sidney Brown because he is nasty when he's out there. He's the guy that if you go to the bar and somebody says something slick to you, he's already breaking glass over that other guy's friend. So he's definitely somebody you want on your squad. But the injury history does concern me a lot, just because he hasn't been able to stay on the field healthy, and he wasn't used as much in Fangio's system last season. I feel like Fangio was leaning towards McCollum than Brown at times. I feel like even in the playoffs. So it's, there's question marks there, and it's question marks that we don't have answers to because we are on the outside looking in. But I would love a guy like Malachi Starks, because I feel like he's that center fielder that you need. He's that final piece of the defense that's locked in for another 4 to 5 years because you took him in the first round. And you don't have to pay him a lot of freaking money like you have to pay CJ at the end of the day. Like, these are, it's a smart move, but is it a necessary move? Like, should they focus on replacing Milton Williams when you already have a Moro Ojomo? Like, should they focus on edge when you have guys like Ojulari, like Uche, like Nolan Smith, like Jalix Hunt? Like, there's pieces everywhere.
The one thing I will say to that, though, is how many of those guys that you named are on the last year of their deal? And that's where you have to start looking at. But you can still argue, do you need to get that value high, or do you replace them with, like players, the players who were drafted a little bit lower and you can now develop a little bit because of how well a Moro Ojomo and others have performed.
Exactly. They're gonna come out on top in one way or another. It's gonna be one of those drafts where it's like It's just working. It works for them. They did the right thing, no matter what they do. But is there a move that would surprise you in this draft that the Eagles make?
Drafting a quarterback. I want to get this out of the and when I say drafting a quarterback, I mean drafting Jalen Milroe, right? So let's just talk about this since we have to
Let's
talk
talk
about
about the
this.
elephant in the room.
We got to talk about the elephant in the room, right? And we can even like call part B of this trading AJ Brown. These are two things that are not going to happen. Right?
I'm not entertaining that nonsense. Get the hell out of here with AJ Brown trade talk.
And I won't use their name because they made a point to say that people only complain so they can use their name and get clicks. We all know who I'm talking about. The idea that, and this is again going to be a two-parter, trading AJ Brown, and listen, I absolutely get the immense talent that Abdul Carter is. Here's the other thing. I also get the immense talent that AJ Brown is, and I get his chemistry with this offense with not only Jalen Hurts, but with Devontae Smith and with the rest of people sleep on what a core teammate AJ Brown
is. A leader. The guy is a leader.
People sleep on that because they see, oh, he's a wide receiver. He must be a diva. No. Oh, he's reading on the sidelines. He must be unhappy about this or that, or somebody who he has a deep, meaningful past football relationship with. He's getting angry with, and there's a little bit of shouting. Oh, well, that must be, he hates it here and he wants to go elsewhere. Like, couldn't possibly be two heated men in a sport that gets you fired up. Couldn't possibly be two guys who have less of a filter for each other because they know each other a lot better, right? So, listen, I'm not here to entertain any ideas about trading AJ Brown anywhere, especially not to the Pats. It's not going to happen. And if it means that they're not going to get Abdul Carter, I hate to say it because I really want him, but that's fine with me because listen up, I'd rather have AJ Brown right now, and that's 100%. Now, I'm going to rant really quick, and then
okay. So let me dive in. Yeah. Let me dive in real quick.
All right, fine.
So just to speak on AJ Brown. So to speak on AJ Brown, you mentioned that the leadership that nobody sees. You remember the obviously the year that the Eagles went to the Super Bowl, they lost to the Chiefs. There was a game against the Saints at the Link where Jalen Hurts was rumored to be able to play, but they held him out. Right. Eagles lost that game. I forgot what AJ did that, it wasn't enough or whatever case may be. When the media entered the locker room, I will never forget this. When the media entered the locker room, it was a very, very down mood. A very down mood. None of the guys looked like they wanted to talk. They all felt that they were losing out on clinching the division at that point. AJ Brown turned around. I've never seen the players get dressed this quick. AJ Brown, fully dressed and everything, prepared for us, turned around and said, okay, everybody just come to me. I got what you need. He took ownership of everything. He took accountability of them losing that game and saying straight out, it wasn't Gardner Minshew's fault. He took ownership. He took accountability. And these are things that they're not going to see on the field. You're going to see a frustrated guy because, listen, growing up, we all played sports and we all got frustrated with each other when one person messed up. It happens. But AJ Brown's leadership, like Zach mentioned, is top tier and is right there on he is a core member of this team.
You have the organization riding around trying to find his stolen car. Like they value this guy. Like, I don't understand what has to happen to get it through people's skulls that the team values this guy, the organization values this guy, the quarterback values this guy, the fans value this guy. Enough of this, right? So shutting the door completely, fully on any AJ Brown trade this offseason. It's asinine, to quote Stephen A. Smith, ass of 10, ass of 11, ass of 12. We're done with it, right? And to now drive that right into the next completely ludicrous concept is the idea that the Eagles would draft Jalen Milroe, especially with one of their first two picks in this draft, right? So the idea that he's going to be there with their second pick, I think is just, or in and of itself is a non-starter because he's not going to be there that late. I think he's too talented to be there for the Eagles' second round pick. So now you're talking about, do they trade back in the first round, or do they select him at 32, or do they potentially even trade up for him? And you're talking, I understand he's an immense talent as a runner at the quarterback position. And I think that you can develop him to the point as a passer where he will be a successful quarterback in the league for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You have a successful quarterback in the league already who is 26, mind you, right? This is not a guy who, is either on his way out like an Aaron Rodgers was when the Packers got Jordan Love. This is not a guy who, the Eagles have a fair opinion on, but he clearly has his issues like a Carson Wentz, right? This is not either of those situations. You cannot treat it as a one-to-one cookie cutter situation. And you can't tell me that the best use of your assets when you're trying to win a Super Bowl and you have as many holes on the defense as this team has is to use a top 50 pick on a quarterback when you have a guy who is, I think he's deservingly so, a consensus top 5 quarterback in the league after this latest Super Bowl
Top 3, in my opinion, if you ask me.
I would agree, but I think that a lot of people would have him closer to 5. I don't even care. You're talking about a top 5 guy at 26.
Well, not Darius Slay. Darius Slay has him out of the top.
People love to bring up the Cam Newton comparison because they just think like, oh, let's point out a quarterback who runs and they're all the same. Completely different situations, right? Cam Newton, if you watch, the frequency with which he ran and the carelessness with which he ran was so far different than Jalen Hurts, right?
Mm-hmm.
The situation around these two quarterbacks, night and day. Cam Newton, unfortunately, did not have the organizational structure, the team chemistry, did not have the people around him in his life effectively to care for him in the way that Jalen Hurts does, right? And so I understand the concerns that Jalen Hurts is going to get, knocked around and, maybe his career doesn't last as long as we would all want it to, right?
Mm-hmm.
But does that mean that you draft a guy now to be his successor? I think absolutely not. Because if you're looking at that, if you're drafting him in the second round, that's a 4-year contract. How many years are we predicting? Lane Johnson's been on his last 3 years for the past 5 years. So how long are we going to say that Jalen Hurts is going to last? Are we predicting him to only last 2 years? Because if he lasts 3 years, now all of a sudden your rookie effectively quarterback only has 1 year left on his contract. And you're going to have to start paying a quarterback fresh out of that. So you completely lose that advantage of having that cheap young quarterback. And I understand it's the most important position in organized sports. I understand that it's the hardest to knock down. But that's the other side of this coin too, is that if you squander a top 50 pick, and again, that's if they pick them at 32, they trade down, they trade up, like whatever the case is, you're just pissing away a top 50 pick on the potential that your guy could be as good as the guy that you already have who's entering his prime. And that's just a ridiculous concept to me. I can't even think of a legitimate argument in its defense.
And this is why in 2025, you don't tune into the radio anymore. You have access to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, so you can listen to all the good stuff, all the hard stuff. If you guys don't want people out there making asinine comments, stop giving them the clicks. But I completely agree with you. And one thing I disagree with, I say this with respect, I don't think Jalen's entering his prime yet. Like, it just feels like he's teetering, like he's tethering with it a bit. He's going in and out. But once he hits it, like Jalen, like when I think about Jay, like I think about him in the realm of, if we're talking about basketball, a Kobe Bryant, a Michael Jordan. Like, he has that mindset. Baseball, a Derek Jeter. Like, the guy wants to win and knows what it takes to win and is willing to do what it takes to win. That's a big difference between him and a lot of other quarterbacks. He's willing to do what it takes to win, and he understands what that means. It doesn't mean grabbing the ball, running with it like a Josh Allen, hurtling over everybody, and thinking that you're invincible. It doesn't mean taking over the game. It means playing within your team, playing within your system, within the realms of what you have, and taking advantage of the talent that's around you. And Jalen is wise beyond his years. He's been wise beyond his years since he was, in college, I feel like. He's going to be one of the greats. And I can't wait I can wait, actually, because when he's retired, I'm going to be old as hell. Jalen is going to have a phenomenal career.
No, absolutely, and not to one up you, but if I to give an NBA comp to Jalen, and that Kobe comp's there because there is that Mamba mentality, there's that love he has for Kobe, obviously, and this is also the Jordan Brand connections to Michael Jordan. Tim Duncan,
Oh
like
yes,
that's Jalen
fundamental.
Hurts, right? This is a guy who is an absolute professional. He understands doing what it takes to win. This is somebody who can beat you in a variety of different ways as well. And you're talking about the potential for him to not even quite be in his prime. It's almost as if he may have multiple primes, right? So you look at it, and this is the era of Golden Legs Jalen Hurts, right? Where he's able to win games, with his legs. This is the tush push era. This is where he's running up and down the field against all kinds of teams. He's shown an ability to sling the ball with some of the best of them in the league.
Yep.
He's shown that he's an absolute student of the game as well, right? So this is a guy who I am fully convinced, should he ever need to make that transition to more of a pocket passing quarterback, he can absolutely do it. And he can be successful at a championship contending level at that. So I'm not ready to give up on Jalen Hurts, which is a crazy thing to even say coming off of his Super Bowl MVP appearance at 26 years of age. But this man is he's going to be the quarterback easily for the next 5 years. I hope for the next 10 years. And I think he has an opportunity to really reach those levels based on just his sheer knowledge of the game and desire to consistently improve himself, both physically, mentally, in any shape and form.
It feels like everything we wanted Donovan McNabb to be, everything we wanted Randall Cunningham to be, is exactly what Jalen Hurts is. He's a great player. He's very elusive back there. He can do whatever he wants to do. I mean, the guy is hurdled and he's front flipped over defenders, and it's been remarkable. But he, like you mentioned, like he's intelligent. He knows what the hell he's doing, and he's working within what he can work with. But they're in a big Super Bowl window right now. They're in a great place in the NFC, so it's gonna be definitely something good to see.
Look, it's not my job to glaze Jalen Hurts, but listen,
Krispy
every
Kreme it.
single team should want a Jalen Hurts in any single sport. To have someone who works so hard, who is so successful, who is such a pure student of the game, humble, gives back to the community,
And there's four of them. I mean, not even four. There's clones of them on offense. Like they're all alike. Saquon,
no,
Devontae,
it definitely
AJ.
seems that way. Like they're all
all
like-minded
similar.
individuals, which is
Mhm.
and it's part of the culture that the Eagles have set, which is so rare in sports in general. And we look around Philadelphia and we look at the culture that some of the other teams have set. And
Do you know who's responsible for that culture?
who do you got?
Your boy Nick Sirianni.
You know what? Welcome back to Sunday Dinner, Nick. Officially, full ride throughout the year, no matter what happens. No worries of getting your card taken away.
Jumpsuits for everybody.
Welcome back. Sauce on me. Ready to go.
It's like we said over the last 2 years. It's weird to see such a very well-run organization from top to bottom. I gave Nick a lot of flack over the last 2 years, but I apologize multiple times on this podcast. But to focus on the matter at hand, I need your one prediction of either a big trade, a big selection. What's going to be the one thing that happens? Your prediction of what's going to happen on draft weekend.
Eagles swap Jalen Hurts for Kirk Cousins.
Stop them. That's not no. You can't give that kind of rant and then go back on it.
It's gonna happen.
Oh, what do you want to happen? Let me clarify this.
Man, I don't even know that's a good question. What I want to happen. I feel like there's almost at a certain point, what I want to happen is what Howie's going to do. There's just that certain level of trust that Howie has deserved, which is so strange because it's so rare for a front office to really kind of warrant that. It's not something Philadelphia is used to. Something that I hate to say it, but usually teams in Boston are more accustomed to, but as long as they don't overextend themselves in a trade, I'm pretty set, honestly, man. Like there's so many different directions that they could go in this draft. Even if they decide not to go safety, not to go defensive line, and they go for a guy like Trey Amos, out of Mississippi with that first round pick. Like I think cornerback is. I want to say this earlier. I'm a Kelee Ringo guy. Let me get that out of the way immediately. I am a Kelee Ringo guy. But I think corner is still an option for this team in the draft, especially rather high. So if you have the opportunity to get a third elite corner in this draft, that's a possibility. So I'd say look out for that.
I've heard from sources around the team that Keelee's, there's some that praise Kelee, but there's a bit of a concern with Kelee as well that he may not be able to make that starting leap. So that is out there.
My question is, can he go from? I think he can be a capable starter, but can he be a reliable starter? Can he be, an above average player? Like that's where I wonder where his ceiling is. I think his floor is definitely like. I'm not concerned if they have to go through, 1, 2, 3 games with Kelee Ringo as a starting corner. I'm not necessarily concerned if he has to be the starting corner for an entire season, as long as Q and Coop are both out there. My thing is that going to be a strength for the Eagles, or is that going to be barely not a weakness?
I got 2 predictions. The first one, Eagles are going to make a big trade. And that trade is going to involve the Cincinnati Bengals.
Interesting.
Eagles are going to land Trey Hendrickson, and they're going to get their edge rusher. They're going to pay him the money he wants to get paid. And I feel like it's not going to be very costly, but they're going to make a big move for an edge rusher. The second one is, I think they draft a linebacker in this draft, and I think that linebacker takes over Nakobe Dean's role. And there's that kid out of Clemson, Carter. I feel like he could be a great fit.
Barrett Carter. Yeah.
Bring him in. He might outplay Trotter. He may play Dean once Dean goes down with injury. Like Nakobe, I think is entering. Is he entering contract year? He got drafted the same year as Davis, right?
Yeah, he was the third round. Was he the third round pick with Davis, or was he the third round pick with Carter? No, he was the third round pick with Davis because it was Smith and Carter, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So it's contract year.
Big year.
I love Dean because Dean is he's very, very, very like his football IQ is there. Like it's there.
Yeah.
But he's he had that unfortunate injury that took him out of the year last year. The year before that, he had an unfortunate injury and it took him a while to get acclimated. I know they're big on him, but at the same time, it's kind of like if you get a rookie that comes in and just outplays you, like Vic Fangio has shown that he doesn't care about people's feelings. He just wants the best guys on the field.
Yeah, well, the big question is, is another team going to price him out of Philly? I feel like I think he would return, and they would bring him back on a reasonable deal. But I don't think that necessarily precludes Philadelphia from drafting a linebacker either, especially if we're talking about a guy like Barrett Carter, who shared the field with Jeremiah Trotter Jr. And I think that's something that you can potentially look to, almost in a Georgia Junior sense, build that linebacking core moving forward now with these 2 young linebackers there for first and foremost. There is one other name that I do just want to throw out. I don't know what round. I initially predicted the 3rd round, but now I'm hearing that you go even to the Eagles in the 2nd round. There's just one name that I want everybody in Philadelphia to know, because this is the guy who I think has really impressed a lot of scouts so far. And in Philadelphia, I think he could be an absolute wrecker. And that's Oluwafemi Oladejo out of UCLA, who is just an absolute game wrecker. People were given comparisons to who was that linebacker that the Ravens got a couple of years ago?
I don't want to butcher the name, but it starts with an O2.
Owe, right?
Oh, yes.
Drawing similar comparisons, just an absolute freak athletically.
When is he expected to go?
I'm sorry?
When is he expected to go? What round?
I've seen him float around between 60 and 90. So closer to the tail end of second round more recently. But
So
I
Eagles have the
have
pick
even heard
before
some
pick.
people suggest that he could potentially go in the first round, which I think is a little premature, but it's a possibility. Odafe
Okay.
Owe is the Ravens pass rusher.
It feels like this is the weekend of just unpredictable things happening. Expectations are high, obviously, but at the same time, it's like you don't know what the hell to expect with this team. I didn't expect AJ Brown's car to get stolen in Philadelphia. There's a lot of things you can't really expect, but one thing we can say is that AJ Brown's not being traded. Jalen Hurts is not they're not drafting Jalen Hurts' successor. They traded for Robinson. They have McKee, who's shown to improve himself. I think it's going to be a big draft for the Eagles defense, and I feel like that's how he's doing. He's got the offense locked in contracts. The defense is going to be a rotating door of young talent outside of Carter, Mitchell, DeJean, Bond, obviously. I love Nolan Smith. The way he came back is phenomenal. Nolan Smith. Did you know? And I caught this by listening to the PHLY podcast today. But Jeffrey Lurie mentioned the fact that in the draft where they selected Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith, the Chiefs actually called the Eagles to trade up for the Eagles pick, which was a Nolan Smith pick, and how he was trying to get a feel of who they wanted, and they wouldn't say who they wanted, so they assumed it was Nolan Smith. So imagine if they traded that pick and it ended up being Nolan Smith for the Chiefs.
What could have been?
What could have been, right?
Would have made a big difference this last year. I want to tell you that. Sucks to suck. Don't know what to tell you, KC.
But yeah, I mean, listen, we're gonna be having a great draft weekend. From my understanding, we'll be having a pre-show on Thursday, a pre-show on Friday, possibly a pre-show on Saturday, as well as a post-show. You won't be seeing us unless we get a little bit too in love with the chat. You won't be seeing us streaming for countless hours. But definitely tune into the coverage. The Eagles team has done a phenomenal job this season and this offseason, keeping up with everything Eagles wise. So, you'll definitely, like I said, you'll see us pre-game show, post show, and then we'll go from there. But draft is on Thursday. Flipping the Birds, we are back every Tuesday and Friday night. I guess it'll be a bit of rotating doors. So you see some new faces, not a ton. But in that, listen, there's about 500 people in here, and I can say, like, for this being our first show back in a couple months, thank you. Just thank you.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely unreal to and we had regulars popping in like as soon as we started 15 minutes late, and people still sitting waiting for us, be patient, and immensely appreciate that. And just to see, I mean, everybody who came back, obviously Zach, Wesley, Martian, Lynch being the first to pop in, but of course we got Doc Braun, so many more people showing up. Thank you so much for just the support. This podcast has meant a lot to us individually. It's meant a lot to Philly Sports Network, and to just have this type of support just beginning a new year is definitely something that it goes beyond what we can express in words. So just thank you very much for joining with us, and get ready for a hell of a year.
I completely agree. We'll see you guys next week to recap the draft. But other than that, hope you guys have a great weekend. Hope you guys enjoy the draft. And hope you guys enjoy the shows that are coming up as well. Until then, I'm Brian Cameron alongside Zach Chavalella, and we're Flipping the Birds.
Go Birds, baby.
Flip.